Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Speaker, do you agree it was poor judgment on your part while in Washington, D.C. to make comments at a retirement party for a Liberal friend of yours, Klaus, talking about your history, partisan history with the Young Liberals of Canada? You're on an official Speaker delegation that originated before you became Speaker. Do you believe your comments again that night were a breach of the code when talking about partisan politics on a Speaker delegation?
I thank the honourable member, Mr. Duncan. I'd just like to provide some context, and I would also like to be able to provide context on those comments.
That I first met Klaus, 1994. I was running for president of the Young Liberals of Canada, and there was this guy who knew all these young Liberals, but I'd never seen him in a party before. He spoke with this accent, you know, I wasn't certain where this was coming from. And I remember one time he pulled me over and he said, "Greg." So I go, he's by the curtains in the back of the room. He says, "Greg, you're going to win."
I only use that reference just to place it within time. The error that I made is that I should have talked about the year that I met and not provide any other context around it. So, but given where we are and given what the situation is, it is an error and it is one that won't be repeated. I will not be talking about my past.
So again, Monday morning you apologized in the House and said you'd do better and you'd change course, and 24 hours later you committed the same issue again. The change, I'm sorry, through you, Madam Chair. The point was it was just a biographical reference. The aha moment came a little later that week in speaking with a member of the opposition.
This guy's garage.
To all of you here, to all of our colleagues in the House, and indeed to all Canadians, I am sorry.
If you were involved in a situation that needed an arbitrator, and you saw the arbitrator at an event with the person on the other side of the table, maybe if we'd imagine a union negotiation with management or some type of dispute between two parties, and you saw the arbitrator, the person whose hands your case was in, at an event with your opposing counsel or with the opposing partner in that situation, would you want that arbitrator to continue to hear your case and to make that decision after seeing he or she in their full arbitrator's uniform, or at least with clear signals that that's who that person was at that time, saying nice things or being involved in any way with the person on the other side of the table? Would you want that person to hear your case?
Madam Chair, am I permitted to respond?
Sure.
So, Madam Chair, if I could, I thank the honourable member for that question. This has been something that actually has been a bit of an aha moment for me. Madam Chair, I thought speaking about the aha moment came in discussion with a member of the opposition when I realized that by talking about my past, I thought it was a value-free statement, just recounting the things that I did, such as the questions that Mr. Scheer just asked me. But the aha moment came when saying that people don't see that when I talk about my past, it's not a value-free statement. They see it as a way as almost making a statement today about my political partiality. And that was not my intention. I thought I was just talking about the posts and the roles that I held in the past and the context in which things were made.
Chair, Mr. Fergus, you stated that you realized that it was a mistake when it had been aired publicly, and that if only you had a moment to reflect on it, you wouldn't have done that. You stated that as though the video were done in isolation, except that it wasn't done in isolation, because on the evening of December 1st, the day before the Liberal leadership announcement, an interview in the Globe and Mail, written by Laura Stone, was published, in which you praised Mr. Fraser and offered partisan comments. Did you think that that interview was going to be in private?
No, not at all. Through you, Madam Chair, I was being interviewed, and I made it again clear during that interview that it wasn't talking about his current place. I was talking about, matter of fact, if we can get the transcripts of it from Ms. Stone, I said very clearly that I can't talk about political current affairs, but I could certainly talk about the man that I knew.
You made comments, including referring to the Liberal Party as our party. Those were your words. You thought it was appropriate to take an interview with Laura Stone in your capacity as Speaker of the House to speak about a sitting MPP who is the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, or was, on the eve of a convention. You thought that was appropriate as Speaker of the House of Commons.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Cooper, I had an interview with Ms. Stone to talk about the person who I knew, the person who I had an interaction with, and I made it very clear during the interview that it's not to talk about current politics. I couldn't do that as Speaker.
Well, you did refer to the Liberal Party as our party, and I would submit, Mr. Fergus, with the greatest respect, the fact that you didn't see an issue with that demonstrates or raises questions about your judgment. Now, I do want to drill down on your statement around the video and how that came about. You said that you were approached by a family member of Mr. Fraser. Who was that family member?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to provide all the information on this.
A simple question. Who was the family member?
Madam Chair, I've been a member of PROC, and I know that we've been very careful about revealing the names of family members. I'm happy to provide that information, and I will, to the clerk of PROC. But
when was the request made?
May I ask that the committee speak to Mr. Fraser and ask him if it's okay for him to reveal the name of the family member?
Well,
so I think I'm pausing the time for a second. I think what Mr. Cooper has done is move on, because we do know that you're undertaking to bring those documents. I will confirm that all members want those documents at the end of your appearance. We still have lots of time with you. But what I hear from Mr. Cooper is that he has moved on asking when the request was made. So I feel Mr. Cooper hears what you're saying. I think he has the same regard. So the floor is back yours, Mr. Cooper.
When was the request made?
The request was made on November 27.
November 27?
That is correct.
Okay. And in your statement to the House on December 4th, you stated that you were asked to record a video to be played at an intimate gathering. What was that intimate gathering?
It was to be through you, Madam Chair, it was to be a surprise goodbye with members of Mr. Fraser's team to be played on December 1st.
To be played at December 1st. And who was Mr. Fraser's team?
I don't know, but I'm assuming it was close folks who had...
I presume you're talking about his political team? Would that be Mr. Fraser's team?
I'm assuming it would comprise part of his political team, but it certainly could be other friends and family and gathering.
And the event was to be held on December 1st. Where was the event? What location?
I do not know.
So you had no idea? But you knew it was going to be played for Mr. Fraser's team. The number of people there you weren't sure of. And as you indicated, part of that would have been his political team. So, Mr. Fergus, that again raises serious questions about your judgment. And when did you find out that it was played at the Ontario leadership announcement? What time before then were you alerted that it would be played?
I wasn't alerted at all that it would be played. Indeed, I had received assurances that it wouldn't be played publicly. From
who?
From the family member.
From the family member. And so you mean to tell me you found out at the same time the public found out?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is absolutely correct.
And you had indicated that a staff member recorded the video in your office. Who was a staff member who recorded the video?
Okay.
I've asked a simple question.
You have asked a simple question. I'm taking by the response and the beep, beep, beep that we're not getting that answer, but it sounds...
I'd be happy to provide that answer. I'm a little uncomfortable on, again, it's a tradition of this committee and of this House is that the Member of Parliament is responsible for the actions of his or her staff. I could tell her that it was a staff member.
Excellent.
And it was my staff member from my head office.
Minimize, so I think that's kind of where I was getting to, but it does sound like you're agreeing to provide the documents. Once again, we will get committee to confirm that we would like those documents.
You have stated that you were given the assurances that the video would not be used in a public forum. That's correct. And that...
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct.
And you were under the understanding that it would be played amongst intimate individuals within Mr. Fraser's group or team.
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct.
You stated in your comments, your introductory comments, and I think it's something that no question has really picked up on yet, but you stated that you've been friends with Mr. Fraser for a long time. How long approximately?
I could tell you since 1989.
Since 1989. You said that Mr. Fraser supported you quite a bit over the years, and I think you even, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this was in part of the translated part from French, but you had said that he was very supportive of you when you were getting together with your wife. Did I hear that correctly?
Indeed. Mr. Fraser, my wife and I had started going out that summer. Mr. Fraser was a key person. He and his wife were slightly older. They had some young children. They were role models for us.
But I would like to talk about the events. I would like to talk about the past. Is this the first time that your judgment has been questionable? I am not able to respond to this, Madam President.
Okay. Now, with respect to normally when a speaker is elected, we all know that normally what would happen is there'd be an election. After the House is dissolved, people would be campaigning to be a speaker, so on and so forth. After a general election, the first order of business is to elect a speaker. In your case, it literally was because of the resignation of a former speaker. So normally, there would have been more of a kind of a cooling off period, I'd like to refer to it as, in terms of, you had time to campaign to be a speaker and so on and so forth. In your case, that was not the case. In terms of recommendations, we heard from the clerk this morning about perhaps beefing up some of the briefings and recommendations and to train new speakers the do's and don'ts of being a speaker. Is there any recommendation you would also put forward, given this lessons learned, that you think that we should also recommend to the House?
I think that's the clerk had brought up an excellent suggestion to beef up the aspects on the briefing and the briefing binder that is provided to the speaker, and to making sure that protocols are put in place so that any outside communication from the speaker would run through this system. This is what we're putting in place right now.
Perfect. And Mr. Speaker, you're probably not aware of that, but late last night, many members of PROC received letters supporting you in your role as Speaker. In fact, I believe at 10 a.m. this morning, the West Island Black Community Association was holding a press conference in Quebec supporting you and acknowledging you made a mistake. And I don't know about you, but I think every single one of us in this room has made a mistake in their life. It's what we do with it. We apologize, we learn from it, we move on. And I wanted to personally convey to you that you have people supporting you that have written to all of us to say that you're new. We all make mistakes. It's time to acknowledge we made a mistake. You've apologized for that mistake. We're going to put remedies in place. But I want to thank you and let you know that there is support out there for the role model you are playing for young Black Canadians. And I wanted to thank you for that.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
point of order, Mr. Duncan.
Wondering, just in reference to Ms. Romanato's comments about, she referenced some emails that we received last night, including the members of PROC's personal parliamentary emails. I'm looking for unanimous consent if I could table those 2 letters that were provided to us by email last night, and also including in that a copy of the metadata from both of those. When you open up the Microsoft Word document, you could actually go and see who the original authors of those 2 were. I'd like to table not only the letters, but along with each, that the author of the one letter dated yesterday came from a Liberal appointed senator, Senator Andrew Cardozo. And I'd also, in the second letter, like to table not only the letter, but the metadata that shows that the author of that original letter was a former Liberal Member of Parliament, Frank Baylis. I'd ask for unanimous consent that those full documents be tabled with the committee, please.
The fundamental rule of being Speaker is also one of the easier rules to follow. And that is, you just don't do partisan things. You don't participate in partisan events. You don't say things publicly, or certainly not in a capacity wearing Speaker's robes or in his office that would have any connection to partisan activities or partisanship or indicating partisan favor. You did the interview with the Globe and Mail where you praised a sitting Liberal politician who, as far as we all know, is planning. He's currently an MPP. He's given every indication he's going to run again as a Liberal in Ontario. So it's not like it was a retirement party or he's going off to do something else. He's going to continue being an active partisan player in Ontario politics. You referred to the Ontario Party as our party. So all of this comes to light. In addition to this, we understand that your chief of staff, which I understand your hesitance to name certain people at committee, but he is listed on a public website, the Government Employee Directory Service, and that is Tommy Defas. I understand that he was very close with the current Prime Minister Trudeau. He was his executive assistant at one point, and now he's your chief of staff. So having that hyper-partisan role in your very recent past, hiring someone very quickly out of the PMO with a very close relationship, personal relationship with the Prime Minister, and now this comes to light. So I again ask you, you talked about the arbitrator and you didn't quite address the nature of my question. If you're a hockey player and you're about to play a game and you just saw the referee in his uniform giving a pep talk to the locker room of an opposing team, it wouldn't matter what the context was, would it? You wouldn't want that official refereeing your game. If you were involved in some kind of dispute that needed an arbitrator and you saw that judge in his robes at an event with opposing counsel, it wouldn't matter what the context was. You can't unsee that. You've now acknowledged there was a grave error of judgment. As many colleagues have mentioned, you are trusted to make on-the-spot decisions without time to run things through filters or decision-making trees. And we have to trust that that's coming from a nonpartisan and objective place. And I would suggest the fact that you didn't see that shows that you're still too close to the partisanship of it. You're too close with these partisan players that you don't see that for members of other parties, it would be a problem. So again, would just ask you, would you want to hear your case adjudicated? Would you want to play in a sports game, having seen the referee or having seen the judge or arbitrator involved in that type of display with an adversary or with an opponent? Would you trust that process having seen that?
Madam Chair, through you, I think it's really important, and I thank the honourable member for his intervention, the person who has sat in this role before. To go back to the ref analogy, quite frankly, it was a different league in which we were involved. A, but B, I also recognize that the member is right, that talking about my past, although when in reference to the notion of our party, that was when I was actually a resident of Ontario back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, up until 1994. That was at that time that it was referred to that. Now, I do not like talking, I don't want to talk about my past here, because every time I do, I know that it sounds like I'm being partisan. It was a matter of record that at that time we were both members of the same party. It is a fact that I'm not validating that today. So I just want to make sure about that. Second thing, you'd raised the issue of my chief of staff. As you know, being speaker, that you are administrating a large organization here. My chief of staff left Parliament Hill in early 2018, almost 6 years that he's been occupying a senior management role in the private sector. He is someone who can help manage this, but more importantly, someone who also has political experience, who understands what it is to be a third political party, to be in official opposition and in government. So it's someone who has an ability to really hear and respond to the needs which are brought up by all folks. So that's the reason why this person was hired. He's calm, he's collected, and has a great reputation on the Hill.
Thank you.
That on Saturday night, you learned of the video in the same way all Canadians did. I want to know the actions you took immediately following that. Did you feel betrayed? Did you contact Mr. Fraser? What did you do in terms of the Liberal convention? And what did you do in terms of your own team, your chief of staff? The clerks have testified, Mr. Jantz testified that you were in contact over that weekend around the apologies. So I need to know what actions you took. And secondly, I wanted to ask in terms of the Washington trip. I mean, we went through this crisis. It was convulsions around the speakership in October. It was profoundly difficult for our Parliament, and I think for Canadians. We're in what can be legitimately described as a crisis. Two parties that day, the Bloc Québécois and the Conservative Party, called for your resignation. Did you contemplate cancelling your trip? Because it seems to me in a minority parliament that kind of situation merits that the Speaker be here in the House of Commons, at the very least, having discussions with members of Parliament.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. So 2 questions. So regarding what was my reaction on the Saturday night when that video came out, I was obviously sickened. The immediate calls were, how did this happen? This was not supposed to be a video that was supposed to go anything besides to a private gathering. So there was that aspect of it, and trying to...
May I ask who you called?
I called my chief of staff, and we started to go through it. I did not personally call Mr. Fraser. And I'll be honest with you, the reason why is that I knew that this was such a situation. I did not want anyone to think that I was calling Mr. Fraser to influence what he would say. I'm going to let the process play out. I knew I had truth on my side, so didn't want to play around with that so that I would be accused afterwards. Did you call Mr. Fraser? Did you try to work things out? Your close friends and the like. Made sure that did not happen. Regarding the Washington, D.C. trip, Mr. Julian, certainly we did contemplate cancelling the trip. We actually went back and forth on this, had a huge discussion on this matter. We realized that perhaps because of the recusal, of course, on a Monday morning at the first opportunity, I recused myself from any matter that would be coming forward to this debate, and I didn't to make sure that I wasn't going to be a part of the decision making as to terms of what the decision of the deputy speaker would be. Then we found ourselves saying, okay, well, should we cancel or should we continue with this? We had meetings set up with just over a dozen representatives, senator, and we also had diplomatic meetings that had been canceled beforehand when the previous speaker had resigned. These meetings were set up in terms of the speaker receives diplomats, and some of them are accredited from the United States. There were a couple that had been canceled, so while I was going to be there, going to take up the flame and do that, we didn't want to cancel a second time. So that was the reason why we decided, let's go down to Washington. We'll will continue with the responsibilities, and will be back in time for the decision by the chair, Deputy Speaker, rather.
This is a minority parliament, and it is unprecedented. What the clerk and the law clerk and the acting deputy clerk, or the deputy clerk, as cited earlier, were majority legislatures. Do you feel that your actions were appropriate responding to the crisis, learning what you learned on Saturday night, given the fact that this is a minority parliament where all parties have to work together?
I thought that the right action immediately was to recuse myself from any determination that would happen. That way members could feel that it was being done fairly. If I had stayed in the chair, it would not have been. There's no possibility that people could have seen that would have been fair.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, when exactly did you do the interview with Laura Stone?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll get back to committee. I'll have to check my agenda.
Okay. Mr. Fergus, you've been a member of Parliament now since 2015, if I remember, when you arrived here on Parliament Hill. In the 8 years that you've been a member of Parliament, have you ever had a conversation with any of your communications people, either in your constituency office or in your Hill office, saying, no, we can't send this out because it's not saying something that I want to get into the public domain? Something to that effect. I'm not asking you to name staff. I'm not asking you to name an issue. But have you ever had a conversation with anybody saying we have to be careful what we send out because we don't know if it's going to be in the public domain?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Calkins. Through you, Madam Chair, nothing comes to mind.
So you're saying that you don't vet, or you've never ever redacted or changed anything that anybody has written or done for you on your behalf as Member of Parliament? You've never made an edit to a letter that's gone out? You've never made an edit to a social media post? You've never done anything to that effect that's going to go out into the public domain?
No, I misunderstood your question. Of course, yes, that has happened several times.
And you do this, I'm presuming, because I do this as a Member of Parliament, because once it leaves my office and leaves my care and control, I have no more control. I have no control over what that message actually is once it leaves my office. And experience teaches you that very early on in your career as a Member of Parliament, does it not, Mr. Fergus?
That is correct, but Mr. Calkins,
no, that's fine.
May I just?
Well,
can I answer your question, sir?
Well, you already did. So, I mean, the premise of my question, I think you'll be able to get to where you want to go as I follow up with you here. So, the entire argument that I'm hearing here at this committee is that things are right or wrong depending on who as the recipient of the information. When we fully know as members of Parliament that anything that we send beyond our care and control of our offices, and in your case, the office of the Speaker, once it leaves, there is no guarantee that it will end up in the public domain. You've just told me, because it's common sense, because every Member of Parliament does this, every Member of Parliament has this experience, and you are an experienced Member of Parliament, that you ought to have known, and you've apologized, and you ought to have known that something like this could end up in the public domain. And so how is it that with that experience, with all the years of experience of sending out correspondence, sending out letters, sending out social media posts, how is it that you didn't consult with somebody in the nonpartisan aspect of your office? And you, sir, have more staff than any other Member of Parliament here, except for maybe a ministerial office. You have the most resources out of anybody at this table to help you in the administration of your duties and responsibilities. How is it that nobody in the nonpartisan portion of your office was even asked or approached before you sent this out, even though it's a typical practice for a Member of Parliament, even within his own office, to vet these things, knowing full well that they could end up in the public domain? I'm flabbergasted that this happened.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Calkins, it's a difference of kind. I don't know about you, Mr. Calkins, but I'm perhaps have a much lower threshold for when I send out private messages than I do send out public messages. Things which are going to be going out to be published, things that are going out to be displayed publicly. I'm very careful about what is sent out. I'm a lot less cautious in messages that I would send to a longtime friend, or messages I would send to my family, or messages that I would send to even you, Mr. Calkins, if
With the greatest
we
of
were
respect,
corresponding
Mr. Speaker, you
by
weren't sitting in a
text.
lawn chair on the dock at the beach.
Interrupting.
Well,
3
I
minutes
just-
and 30, I get it, it's your time, but I
Yeah.
do need the person that we've invited here to provide information, to be able to provide
Okay.
information, and that opportunity will be given. Mr. Speaker.
I'm finished with my comments.
Okay, so, I mean, given the fact that you were in your regalia, in your office, doing apparently a personal message, not an official message, you've now tried to reassure us, because the issue is one of confidence and one of trust and one of judgment. You've now, you're trying to reassure members of this committee that putting protocols in place will somehow now give you the compass that you need in order to fulfill your job in a nonpartisan way. When the reality is, all you have to do is just stop doing like, how hard is it to stop doing something that's partisan? Like, it's not that you need protocols in how you do things, you just need to stop doing some things.
Okay.
How hard is that?
Thank you. I think it's a rhetorical question, really short.
But if it is not hard to stop doing partisan activities, and this certainly wasn't a partisan activity. And as I also mentioned, the intention was not for it to be at a partisan activity. It was to be a goodbye for a longtime friend. But that being said, Madam Speaker, that is the reason why protocols are going to be put in place. All communications coming out of my office will be going through this process.
Thank you. Per my list, when it comes to the Speaker, we want the records regarding the video for whoever you communicated with. All exchanges would be appreciated in both official languages. And the date of the interview that you had with Laura Stone has also been requested. Do all members agree to that is the information we are asking? Mr. Cooper, point of order?
Well, just on that point, Madam Chair, as far as what we understand, Mr. Fergus is agreeing upon, and again, I'll put it to him, is all emails, memoranda, records of communications in his control in relation to the video tribute, as well as any emails, memoranda, records of communications, including text messages, instant messages, etc., under his control concerning his interview with Laura Stone, any recording or transcript under his control of his interview with Laura Stone, as well as any communications that he has had with John Fraser.
Madam Chair, with regard to the interview from Ms. Stone, we will certainly provide it to you. The only concern that I have is making sure that we could provide it in French, but we are going to get on this right away. I understand that the committee has precedence over every aspect of resources of the House to making sure that the information can be given to the members and supplied to them quickly. So I will provide all of that.
Okay, so that was a little bit more than what I had heard, so I'm not sure, but obviously that's what members want.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Speaker, do you agree it was poor judgment on your part while in Washington, D.C. to make comments at a retirement party for a Liberal friend of yours, Klaus talking about your history, partisan history with the Young Liberals of Canada? You're on an official Speaker delegation that originated before you became Speaker. Do you believe your comments again that night were a breach of the code when talking about partisan politics on a Speaker delegation?
I thank the honourable member, Mr. Duncan. I'd just like to provide some context, and I would also like to be able to provide context on those comments. I only use that reference just to place it within time. The error that I made is that I should have talked about the year that I met and not provide any other context around it. So, but given where we are and given what the situation is, it is an error, and it is one that won't be repeated. I will not be talking about my past.
So again, Monday morning, you apologized in the House and said you'd do better and you'd change course, and 24 hours later, you committed the same issue again.
Again, the change, I'm sorry, through you, Madam Chair. The point was it was just a biographical reference. The aha moment came a little later that week in speaking with a member of the opposition as to what it is just talking about my biography.